we'll go ahead and jump right in. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Kira Backwell, and I am an outreach advisor for FCM programs, and I will be your moderator for this session. Today's webinar is the third of 5 days of interactive webinars covering the many ways that the Green Municipal Fund, can help you plan, design, and implement local sustainability projects. Today, we will be focusing on water. And without further ado, please let me introduce you to today's speaker, my colleague Patrick Kehoe, who is an outreach advisor also for FCM programs, more specifically the Green Municipal Fund. And a reminder, please, just to ask questions in the question box to the right. Patrick, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Kira. Hello, everyone. Really happy that you're all able to join today. I'm looking at the attendees. I see some familiar names from Prince George to Halifax and everywhere in between. So it's really great to have you guys here today. Hope you're settled in wherever you are. If you're back in your office or perhaps on your patio or in your living room or wherever you might be. Yeah, it's as Kira's mentioned, it's a really exciting week for us. Obviously, we'd love to be able to be out and meeting you in person and traveling to your wonderful communities, but of course we can't, and this is the next best thing. So as Kira mentioned, and as you all know, obviously, because you've signed up for the webinar, today we're going to be focusing on water and wastewater, and specifically what our Green Municipal Fund can do to support your community's sustainable projects in this sector. So I imagine that many of you are familiar with FCM before. I know some of you on the list here have applied to us before, and that's great. So I won't spend too much time talking about FCM and what we are, but just in case there are some folks that are new to us, just briefly, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, we're a member-based organization, our members being the Municipalities of Canada. We've been around for well over 100 years. We're the national voice for Canada's local governments. A lot of what we do is lobby the federal government, primarily our partners there, on the interests of our members. So that sort of advocacy can come in various forms, from, for example, looking into things like rural broadband, or the municipalities getting their proper piece of the pie when it comes to cannabis legalization, the national housing strategy, the doubling of the gas tax fund, and the list goes on. Specifically today, we're looking more at some of the efforts we've made to secure pots of funding for our members in terms of municipal infrastructure sustainability primarily. So some of our domestic programs that kind of come into this sort of realm would be things like our municipal asset management program, which is just relaunched, that enables municipalities to strengthen their asset planning. Our Municipalities for Climate Innovation program, which, while no longer open for direct funding, was established really to drive climate change adaptation and mitigation type programs. We still offer a wide variety of resources and tools and training and peer learning and different other sort of supports there through that program. And of course, the one that we'll be mostly focusing on, and maybe one that you're more familiar with, would be our Green Municipal Fund. So it's a really exciting year for us. The GMF is celebrating its 20th year in existence. It's pretty unique in the sense that it's it's able to be a perpetual fund because it's based on an endowment. So over the years, we've been able to secure certain bits of money along the way, including a really groundbreaking amount last year of close to $1 billion added in to the program. We reinvest this endowment in order to be able to provide perpetual funding and resources to the members in the realm of sustainable municipal projects. So it's exciting times. There's lots of new things. If any of you have attended some of the earlier webinars this week, you would know about our new sustainable affordable housing kind of wing to the GMF. On Monday, which I'll get to a bit later, we'll be looking at another one of our new sort of wings that's looking on community efficiency financing. So really exciting stuff. Today, we're looking more at what we would refer to as our core GMF. So maybe the GMF that you're more familiar with. And it's beyond water. We look at multiple funding streams, from energy to sort of land use planning and brownfield remediation, to waste, to transportation. And within all those types of streams, we have different substreams that are eligible projects. And we're going to get today specifically into water, but I thought it was also useful to point out some of these other streams, as if, for example, if many of you are, municipal practitioners in the water and wastewater field, there may be other streams that are relevant to you. I'm thinking things like energy. So if you're looking at improving the efficiency of your facilities, that's something that could be eligible under energy category. If you're looking at, converting your biosolids or anaerobic digestion methods into using some of your wastewater byproducts to create energy, that's another link. Again, waste could be there too if you're looking at finding more profitable or more higher use ways for using your biosolids. That could be a waste project. So all to say that sometimes you might go in looking at one sector, but it could be something that is a perfect fit for something else that we offer as well. And I can completely understand how it's confusing in certain ways. We have now, I believe, over 62 individual funding products. So it can be difficult to say, okay, where do we fit? What stage of the project are we going into? And if there's one thing I really hope that you can take away from this session, is really that that's partly our job. It's a big part of our job, especially people like myself, like Kira, our advisors, is to sit down and talk with you about your projects and really position them in the most successful way possible to access our funding. So we are certainly here to speak about that, and very much welcome you to bring your project ideas to us. So I'm going to start by kind of doing a bit of the general things that might apply to most studies, and then we're going to delve into the water aspect of everything. So just to start off, as I did mention, the GMF is celebrating their 20th anniversary. To date, we've funded over 1,300 projects. We've provided over $862 million worth of grants and loans. And cumulatively through all these, we've led to, and I shouldn't say we because it's your projects, you're doing this, but we've enabled 2.5 million, just over 2.5 million tons of greenhouse gas avoided through all of these projects. So I'm going to start by kind of explaining the stages of funding, which can sometimes be another point of not confusion, but the terms feasibility studies or pilot projects can mean various sort of things to various people in various projects. So I thought it would be great to start about how we define these types of projects. So we try and design our offer so that we can provide support at different points along the timeline of a project. So starting off with your studies, or what we would refer to generally as our feasibility studies. First off, the funding available for those is we can cover up to half of the eligibility or the eligible costs of a project to a maximum of $175,000. So in other words, if your project is 350 grand, we can provide the whole 175. If your project's 500 grand, we're still capped at that 175. This comes in the form of completely grants. So it's not loan based, it's grant based. And generally what we're looking for here is I'll use a specific example as it's a good way to kind of explain it. So let's say you're looking at accessing our funding for water conservation. So typically what we're looking for in a municipal water conservation project is a specific facility or specific grouping of facilities where you're looking to reduce your potable water consumption by at least 40%. That's our threshold there. So you take that as your sort of problem or your case that you're trying to evaluate. Our studies would support you looking at those facilities, establishing your baseline consumption patterns, where you might be using the water, how much you're using, your seasonal variations, all that kind of stuff would go into it. And then you're going to be looking at specific solutions or measures that you can implement that are going to get you to that 40%. So think things like, gray water systems or low flow fixtures or any other of these kind of measures that can be combined to really reduce your consumption. So what we're looking for when we're saying a feasibility study is first that baseline, then you're looking at different solutions, and it can be one or it can be multiple. You're quantifying what those reductions are going to be, or your anticipated reductions would be from those certain solutions. And then you're going to select one, and you're going to go ahead and you're going to do some at least high level design and costing for it. So the goal that we want to see at the end of a feasibility study is that you have concrete next steps with quantified benefits rolling into either, if you're going to pilot something or into a full capital implementation. So often we get inquiries and questions about sort of broad planning or more strategy type studies. Those could be literary studies, just looking at what's out there, which is great and can be a part of the studies, but we really need it to get to that next level where you're really choosing actual solutions and quantifying what you expect to come out of those. So that's sort of the setup, and we fund tons and tons of studies like this, and so there's a lot of great examples. I'm going to share a couple later of sort of how that works. The next up in the list is our pilot projects. These are, again, generally cover 50% of eligible costs to a maximum of $500,000. However, for communities that are under 20,000, and I'm sure there's some on the line that are communities under that amount, you are eligible to request up to 80% funding of your project cost. Now, the determination on those is made on a case-by-case basis. Generally, we're looking for projects that display an innovative kind of approach to it, and ones that are replicable to other communities of similar sizes and situations. So if you think of anything that you can build into a pilot project that might be, a case study that comes out of it as well, or if it's, you're part of a regional network where the results of your studies can be easily shared with peers so that they can, profit from your experience. That's the kind of stuff we look for when we're determining if we're going to go up to that 80%. Now, the pilot projects themselves are fairly straightforward, I hope. The idea is that you've done your study, you've selected an option, a solution, a technology, something that you want to employ, and you're looking to test it out at a smaller scale for a defined period of time. So generally something in between 1 and 3 years. We usually don't go over 3 years for our pilot projects. You want to look for seasonal variability. You want to look for, but we're flexible in terms of the timing to a certain extent. The idea here is that you're testing something out at a small scale. You're evaluating based on, whatever the key indicators you've acknowledged. If that's, if it's a wastewater solution, you want to look at your effluent quality, obviously. You might want to look at some of the monitoring and operational and financial elements of the project, just so you can influence future change. At the end of the pilot, we want to see what the results were and how, if successful, you would be scaling this up or replicating. So take the example of a wastewater treatment plant. If you wanted to, look at a UV technology or something else that's going to change the way you treat your wastewater, and then test it out on, let's say, one of your treatment plants, and then if successful, maybe you'd expand to your other treatment plants. If you only have one plant, or one facility, then maybe you want to test it out on a smaller scale for a certain period of time, and then if successful, you're going to make that a more permanent change, and you're going to scale it up across the whole facility. So that's really what we're looking for with pilot projects. Capital projects, of course, is pretty straightforward in the sense that it's your major implementation. So these are for generally larger projects. We can provide funding for up to 80% of costs to a maximum starting around 10 million. We can go over. That's sort of a case-by-case basis. Generally, I would say projects under maybe 700,000 to 800,000 would be sort of the low range. However, we don't have a minimum ask request. Now, the major difference, obviously, with capital projects is they're not 100% grant-based. They are a combination of grants with low-interest loans. Generally, how it would work was we would provide you with a low-interest loan and then a grant on top of that that's equal to 15% of that loan. So in other words, if you're applying for a $10 million loan, you would get a $1.5 million grant. Now, the purpose behind this is that when you look at your interest rate and then you apply that grant to it, your effective interest rate goes even lower. So at this point, I mean, for municipal applicants that are coming in on a 10-year term, you're looking at like a negative interest rate. We apply that grant so that it's highly competitive towards traditional lending bodies that might be out there. It's important to note that these rates obviously do change. They're strategically positioned to be lower than those than most rates that you can get elsewhere. However, they do change, and we do take the rate at the time of agreement signature should you be successful in your application. So moving on to who can apply. So funding is obviously, it's available to all Canadian municipal governments, and that includes both members of FCM and non-members. But then there also is an option for project partners to apply as the lead applicant. And when I say lead applicant, what we're talking about really is the entity who's incurring the costs. Now, in some instances, it might make more sense for maybe a private sector or a municipally owned corporation or an NGO or nonprofit to apply as the lead applicant. That is fine as long as it's still, a municipal project and the municipality is involved as a partner. And how we generally determine that municipal partnership and involvement would be as a minimum 10% stake in the project in terms of cost. So if you think about it, if maybe a third party, it could be a conservation authority or what have you, is applying as a lead applicant, but the municipalities as their members are looking to provide funding for that, then they could chip in 10% of project costs on a pilot project, let's say, but it would still be led through a third party. So that's another option, and one that if that's something of interest, I recommend getting in touch with us first, of course, to really go through how to position that properly and how to make sure that you're sort of checking the boxes in terms of what we consider an eligible partnership. Now I just wanted to point out, and this will be something that is hopefully a good thing to hear about for others who have already applied to us in the past and are familiar a bit with sort of our processes in terms of the direct funding. So these are some improvements that are specifically for our studies and pilots. Number one is for advanced disbursement, which I noticed on the pre-webinar survey that one of the big barriers is upfront costs, right? We've now enabled it so that municipalities and municipally owned corporations, if they apply and they're approved, can access up to 70% of their grant just upfront, right away, before you've even incurred any cost for the project. That is a change to what we had before, which was a completely cost incurred model where you would have to demonstrate what you've spent and we would reimburse you. So this hopefully is quite an enabling new process that can kind of, help in some of the cash flow situations that I'm sure even in these days, even more important for municipalities to have. As I was speaking about the partners, it also is applicable to some of them. So nonprofits are eligible to receive 50% upfront. Private entities at this point are not eligible. Their funding would still be based on that cost incurred model of reimbursement. The next big change we made that I think is also incredibly enabling is our allowal of staff costs for the lead applicant to be 100% eligible. So what that means is municipalities, municipal corporations, nonprofits, NGOs, they can all, or you can all, access funding for your staff time that you work on the project. So a lot of the time you might be hiring a consultant, which are service costs that are completely eligible. But if you have the in-house capabilities for performing 10%, 20%, 100% of the project in-house, we will now reimburse you for that work. Previously, we had a max, a kind of a cap on that was 10%. So only 10% of your project could be attributed to your in-kind staff costs. That is now removed. So hopefully that is like I said, another really enabling piece for for getting the most bang for your buck, and in the lack of a better term. For private entities, however, that cap is still at that 10%. The last thing I'll bring up quickly is just a simplified reporting procedures. Again, for those of you who previously have had applications with FCM, we did required you to provide like all your invoices and really proof of payment for every cost that you've incurred. We now have a system where it's sort of a letter of attestation saying that, hey, these are our tasks that we agreed to in the application. This is what we actually spent. We attest to signing this amount of money. And so hopefully the process of dispersing of funds is streamlined in a way that makes it a lot easier on both of us, to be honest. So all of that I just mentioned is applicable to sort of all of FCM GMF core funding. But now we're going to get specifically into the topic of the day, water. So as I mentioned, for each of our sort of sectors, so energy, water, waste, transportation, brownfields, we have subcategories. And I thought today we could start by kind of going into the specifics of these subcategories to kind of give you an idea of where your projects and where your initiatives might best fit. And it is possible, like I said, that projects can fall into multiple sectors, multiple subcategories, and generally we look at the one where the sort of primary indicator, environmental indicator, if it's energy consumption reduction or if it's effluent quality, wherever that kind of primary parameter is where we would kind of slot it. So let me see, there we go. So for water, we really separated into 4 categories. The first one, which I touched on a little bit before, is water conservation. So what we're looking for here really is a reduction in potable water use. Now, this subcategory is sort of split into 2 sides. There's one which we consider what we call our kind of municipal water conservation, but then we also have community water conservation that we've added in the last few years. So starting first with the municipal, what we're looking for here is, as I had mentioned, projects that support a 40% reduction in water consumption, potable water consumption, at a municipal facility. So an example of that you could look at would be, let's say, a fire station. You want to incorporate low use water fixtures. You want to maybe have a gray water system use that you can use to wash the fire trucks. Different methods like these that can get you to that 40% reduction within your facility. So again, we would provide support through the feasibility study funding up through a pilot if necessary into the capital implementation of actually implementing those measures. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is the community water conservation. So if you think of community, what we're really talking about here is infrastructure that's beyond the realm of municipal responsibility essentially. So this could be private property, residential, the ICI sector, anything kind of within that realm. So for example, if you wanted to look at, throughout your municipality or maybe just a neighborhood of your municipality and implementing, rainwater harvesting barrels, something that residents can use to water their plants and their lawn instead of using that potable water use from the hose. That is something that could fall under this category. It still requires, like I said, a municipal involvement. If it's not led by the municipality still needs to contribute with that minimum 10% contribution. However, it can be led through the municipality as well. The next category is our stormwater quality, and it's similar in a sense that we offer the municipal side of it and also the community side of it. Oh, and I should also mention, I didn't mention about the water conservation for community, but the threshold is lower, it's 20%. So for stormwater quality, what we're looking at is on the municipal side, really, again, focusing in on specific facilities or specific municipal infrastructure and reducing the amount of total suspended solids that are leaving site. So you can think of implementing low impact development solutions like permeable pavement, like bioswales, again, rain gardens, this type of sort of technologies that can really help in improving the quality of the stormwater that is leaving your sites. Now, on the community side, it's the same thing. We have a lower threshold. For municipalities, we want to see an improvement of at least 80% of total suspended solids. On the community side, it's 60%. Now, some of you might be wondering why we're focusing on quality and not quantity, as obviously stormwater quantity is a huge concern for everybody really, forever and now with climate change adaptation and everything that goes into that. And really the answer for that is that we moved our quantity over into that Municipalities for Climate Innovation program that I mentioned before, just to separate those two. However, if you're doing a project that is focusing more on quantity, generally these can play together, right? So you can sort of do both at once, and we can still allow you to do both at once. You don't have to just focus on quality. You can focus on both. As long as you have that quality aspect to it, then it can still apply. So I don't want to limit your thinking in terms of the types of stormwater projects that we can fund. There just needs to be an emphasis on quality. Now, again, this can go through the same range of feasibility study to pilot to capital and everything between. So I'll share an example of this later on sort of a typical type of project that might work through this. Third last is wastewater system. So another, obviously every municipality has to deal with wastewater. So another huge category, and one of our more highest update categories, of course, because it's something that everyone has to deal with. And as new regulations come into effect and as capacity issues start to happen, there's obviously a huge need for upgrading and sort of altering your wastewater systems and how you deal with wastewater. Our offer here is quite broad. There isn't an exact threshold per se that you have to meet for the wastewater project. Essentially what we're looking for is innovative ways to improve your effluent quality and improve your capacity within your wastewater systems. The only really caveat being that you're reaching either provincial or federal wastewater guidelines and regulations as a product of the type of project that you're doing. So this can go from, if you have a mechanical based system of implementing, new treatment technologies there. If you have a lagoon system, it might be, ways to increase your capacity and so on. And again, I'll share some examples of what other communities have been doing there. And really it's fairly wide open in terms of what we can accept. The last one, what I won't spend too much time on, is septic wastewater systems. And essentially, we're looking at a community neighborhood-wide approach to improving communities that rely on septic systems. So this could be, improving or upgrading a whole neighborhood's septic systems. This could be creating sort of a funding program that enables homeowners to access upfront capital funding to improve their systems. Really what we're looking here in terms of thresholds is getting to a secondary treatment standard. It obviously varies between communities, but that is sort of our last category there. Okay. So now I'm going to get into explaining and just demonstrating a few of the sort of projects that we've had in the water sector over the last several years. This first one comes to us from Quebec, the city of, I'm going to butcher this name, but Cospascal. And what it was a pilot project that was looking at stormwater ditching, essentially providing opportunities for more rainfall infiltration. They did feasibility studies. This was a cool one because it was a regional approach and it involved many municipalities, and they performed feasibility studies on the highest impact areas where they could implement sort of low impact development and ways to really improve the quality and quantity of stormwater runoff that was entering into some sensitive water bodies, actually salmon spawning and salmon territories. So this one was, as I said, a pilot. We provided them with a grant of $125,000 to investigate how it would work. They went in, they had sort of their primary indicators, their baseline indicators of water quality and water quantity, and then implemented these systems of ditches, essentially trenches, and then tested the quality after. It's a good example of, like I said, a regional approach. It's also a good example of how local economics and social aspects can kind of filter into a lot of these projects. So, for example, these communities heavily depended on the fishing industry, and the contaminants in their water was really affecting this industry. So by doing a project like this, they're not only improving that, but they're improving the economic outcomes of many of their residents. So kind of a cool one to share. This next one is coming to us from Nipawa in Manitoba. This is a lagoon site that essentially what they were looking to do is implement a different technology, so an MBBR, which is a moving bed biofilm reactor technology, that essentially allowed them to address problems they were having with nitrogen and phosphorus levels, which is, if many of you are in colder climates, is obviously a concern. And it also enabled them to do it on a smaller footprint versus just expanding their lagoons to, additional cells. This one was a capital project, so we provided a low interest loan of about $4.3 million that was accompanied by a grant of just over $650,000. Moving on is, if my slide moves, there we go. This one comes from Ontario, the town of Amherstburg. Again, this was another capital project. It was a loan similar to about $4 million with a grant of $400,000. Now, as you can see, the total project value, and many of you are probably very aware of the fact that large wastewater treatment plant mechanical plants are incredibly expensive, take an incredibly long time to put together. And our grants aren't in the hundreds of our loans are in the hundreds of millions of dollar range, but we can provide some support in terms of implementing these. So what Amherstburg was doing with their pollution control plant was really upgrading it to a level of secondary treatment from primary where they were before. it's still, to my knowledge, ongoing, and yeah. The next one is one that we share quite often. It touches on several sectors in terms of that it is a wastewater treatment plant in the district of Sechelt in British Columbia, but it's also a net zero. So they've been able to incorporate some of the technologies of utilizing some of the byproducts of wastewater treatment and filtering that into their actual facility itself in terms of power generation. I know that is huge opportunity, and one that municipalities are really interested in accessing. And this leads back to my sort of earlier comments about how it might be a wastewater project, but it could also be an energy project. And the more we can start thinking about these in the same sort of manner, the better for both. This was a larger project. It was a loan of about almost $7.5 million with a grant of close to or just about $1 million. And again, one that we share often because it's a pretty neat one. I have two more for you, and this one we're going across country to Prince Edward Island. So this one from Montague, Prince Edward Island, was kind of a cool example that I wanted to show because it was not only improving the quality of their effluent, excuse me, but it was also diluting their sludge in a way that they could reuse it and provide economic benefit. So what they're doing is using a sort of a geotextile dewatering system for their sludge removal, allowed them to remove over twice the amount that they were before. It lowered the weight of the sludge, so the associated transportation costs and emissions related to that is also less. And they were also able to turn it into a profit of roughly $40,000 a year. So if you work that into your operating budget, I mean, that is excellent. An excellent byproduct that is sort of, again, the sort of twofold thing where you're improving the effluent, but you're improving their transportation and you're making a profit off it. So lots of good things that can happen from that. The last one, which I know I've been focusing a lot on wastewater here, comes to us from the city of Kitchener. This was a pilot project that was looking at stormwater management. So they wanted to look into the application of permeable pavement and bioswales. And it was a pilot in the sense that they had one location that they wanted to test it out on. But with the knowledge of how these types of sort of low impact development interventions can work, they could then apply it to other sites within the municipality, obviously. So this is a really good example of a pilot, and it's a really good example of how you can, test something out, and then maybe based on your asset management strategy, line up down the line when new areas come up for replacement or for development or what have you. Then you have this in your back pocket as a way to say, okay, this is the result we got from that. Now we're confident in going ahead and applying this to larger scale or to more sites at sort of the similar time. So that's the end of sort of the projects we're sharing, and I'll get to very shortly sort of our resource packages that provide hundreds of more examples that you can look into. So moving out of sort of the water specific stuff, just to kind of wrap a little bit before we get into questions. Of course, the elephant in the room is stimulus funding and what we can expect and what we've been hearing and how we can help support municipalities. And essentially, at this point, we're sort of in the same boat as everyone. We don't know what's coming, but what we do currently have can be very helpful in this immediate future. I look first to the feasibility studies, which I detailed, which obviously can really help support getting quote unquote shovel ready, preparing yourself for these types of projects that when and if this sort of funding comes along, you're ready to go and you have all your ducks in a row and you're kind of ready. Of course, our capital projects, that is still also available. So projects that you might have already been prepared to go into or were looking to get to kind of launch sooner before everything happened, we can still provide support through that. And these capital projects can be really enabling to energize your communities and sort of revive that local economy and all that kind of stuff. So as I said, we don't know exactly what's happening, but we do have some things in place already that can start the process. As I mentioned, in terms of our resources, you can visit our webpage, fcm.ca/resources. There's hundreds and hundreds of things. You can, we have different guidebooks, we have case studies, we have, other webinars that have done before, a whole load of stuff. You can filter by water, you can filter by wastewater, you can filter by, different types of communities, anything like that. I really encourage you to go and check it out. And also contact us directly if there's something more specific that you're looking for that you can't find. We'll see what we can do about that. Part of that resource library is our funded project database. So as I mentioned, we funded over 1,300 projects. We have just over 1,200 of those in our funded project database. So how it works is when you apply for funding, you've been approved. At the end of it, you share your final product, and we share that for you through sessions like these, through our funded project database, so that other municipalities can really learn from what you've done, and so that you can learn from what others have done. So really trying to connect that sort of peer-to-peer support. So again, another aspect or another resource that I really encourage you to take a look at and hopefully get some meaningful information from. So really, I started this off with kind of the key takeaway that I wanted you to take from this is obviously that we fund a wide variety of initiatives. We've gone more into the water today, which hopefully, as of course you signed up for this, that might be your interest, but also the other elements that we can provide. Through the funding, the resources, the tools, we try and provide sort of everything you need. Obviously, it's not going to be specific to every scenario, but hopefully a lot to get you started and a lot to support you on your journey through these projects. And the last point, which is the most important that I wanted to really double down again on, is that our advisors, myself, Kira, the rest of our team, we're really here to help you. That's our job. Our job is for you to come to us and say, this is our project. Is it eligible? Where can it fit? What can we do to make this eligible? Do you have any resources? Do you have any other municipalities who have done these similar things that we can learn from? That's our job, is to provide you that. We have these resources that you can go ahead and look at, and we encourage you to do so, of course, but don't think you're on your own when you're coming towards this. We really want to be able to provide that type of upfront support to really position and frame your projects for success. The last thing we want you to do is fill out an application form, spend all that time, and then you submit and it's not eligible or it's not going to work. Not everything is going to be eligible. Not everything's going to fit within the parameters that we have, but we can at least do that exploratory work for you, help you through the application process and beyond. So please reach out when you can. This is just a quick plug to our FCM Connect. Many of you are probably already on it. This is our weekly e-bulletin. It's pretty specific to the Green Municipal Fund, the Municipal Asset Management Program, and our Climate Innovation Program. So it's sort of in the realms of our domestic municipal infrastructure kind of stuff. It's really great. It's the first place where you're going to hear news on new funding opportunities, on new webinar initiatives like this, and so on. So again, if you're not already connected, I encourage you strongly to connect. So we're going to move on to questions. And before we do that, I'm just going to skip ahead a few slides really quickly just to let you know that tomorrow we have another webinar. This one is looking more at our land use, brownfield remediation, waste and transportation sustainability projects and support and sectors. It will be me again, so hopefully you're not tired of my voice or my face. So please join us if that's something of interest and you're able to join. It's the same time as today, and after that we do have one final one on Monday, which is about the home efficiency financing program that I mentioned. So really looking at how communities can launch programs to support residents to get that upfront cost for home energy retrofits particularly. So with that in mind, I'm going to move to questions. And Kira, if you want to jump back on the line, you can maybe direct me towards anything. And please feel free to write your questions in the question box or the chat, or reach out to me directly.
Great. Thank you, Patrick, for that presentation. We do have a few questions in, so I'll just get straight into them. We have a question here saying, is the lead applicant mechanism applicable to energy efficiency areas?
To energy efficiency areas. So typically the lead applicant is whoever's incurring the cost of the project. If the project is focused on energy efficiency, then it would likely fall under energy category. I'm not sure if that is quite the question, but perhaps if not, we can definitely answer that by email after.
Sure, and there's also just a sort of sub-question to that, which I think is quite useful to ask, which is, can somebody from the private sector be a lead applicant? Just maybe to reinforce that.
Yes, that's a great question. Absolutely, a private applicant can be the lead. Again, they need to have a municipal partnership, so it still needs to fit within our criteria of what we consider an eligible project, which is largely focused on municipal infrastructure, although, as mentioned, we do have sort of some community aspects to it as well. And keep in mind that private entities are not eligible for advanced disbursement, and the project costs can only be 10% attributed to their staff time. But yes, absolutely, they can apply.
Super. We have another one here asking, is there any category for source water protection?
That is a great question, and one that we do receive often. Unfortunately, there isn't anything specific to source water protection that we offer. I guess the best way I can sort of make that bridge would be sort of the stormwater quality funding. If you can look at it in that sense, that you're protecting your source water by what's going into it, and I guess that applies to wastewater effluent as well. But directly, no, we don't.
Okay. I have a few questions coming in that are all generally asking for more examples of the various case studies. So maybe could you just guide us again to where we go to get case studies?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different avenues, sort of those resources that I was alluding to a few slides back. I can go back here. So number one, our funded project database is great. So what we do at the end of every project is we have what's called our completion report template that each applicant needs to fill out. So this answers questions like pretty general, how did your project go? What were the barriers that you met? What would you recommend to municipalities that are looking at conducting a similar project? What were your costs? All that kind of stuff. We build that in for the purpose of knowledge sharing with others. So if you go to our funded project database, you can filter by different water categories, whatever specific you're looking to. You can filter by different provinces, by feasibility study, pilot, capital, all tons of different kind of filters that you can look at. And with each one of those, if the project's complete already, of course, you will have access to their final study, and you'll have access to their final completion report that has some of that information in it. So I think if you're looking for that, that is a great place to start. Again, our fcm.ca/resources page, you can also filter for specific case studies if you're looking for something a bit more polished or a bit more targeted towards something. So those would be the best places to start. Again, if you're reaching out to advisors and others at FCM like us, we can help sort of narrow down and maybe find the best ones, the most relevant ones to you as well. I would say look first, and then if you're not finding what you need, come talk to us, and if we can find something, we will, of course.
Super. I have a really great question that just came in asking, what is the assessment process for applications? Maybe you could speak to that again.
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. So the best way I can explain it is generally, I mean, you're free to submit without coming to talk to us first. Absolutely, many people do it, but I would recommend just, even if it's a quick conversation with me or Kira or one of the other team members, would be step one, come to us. We'll do a high level assessment of where your project should fit. if it's eligible, what kind of things you might need to go ahead with an application. So at least we can get that step going. Next, you actually submit your application. One of our project officers will be assigned to it, so they will be doing a more detailed review, checking all the boxes, making sure you have all the documents you need. Again, providing you with some comments, some opportunities for making adjustments that might improve your application, improve your project. So again, another really strong point of a touch point for support. From there, it goes to a third-party peer review. So what we would do is we would send your application out to third-party peer reviewers. They are represented by folks in the municipal sector, the private sector, and the federal sector equally, so a third, a third, a third. They would assess your application based on the criteria, which is embedded in our application forms actually, provide us with a score. We use that score along with some other measures, but primarily that score to make our recommendation on approval or denial. Ultimately, that approval is made by the FCM Executive Board. So it's a process, but we're with you every step of the way, and there are points in between where you can make adjustments. Even after the peer reviewers have reviewed your application, if there's something that comes up, you may have the opportunity to address those before the final recommendation comes. So it's not putting an application to a black hole and hear about it in 6 months. There's really someone that you can contact at any time to check on progress. So hopefully that helps with that.
Super. A few more questions, if that's okay. We have a few more minutes. Do you fund multi-year projects?
Yes, we fund multi-year projects. Typically for our grants, we're talking about projects within the realm of 3 years. We are flexible within that if, things happen. There could be, delays for any number of reasons. So we are respectful of that. But generally it's sort of the specific project and you have your timeline. If you're looking to do a project that is going through phases and you can't really estimate the costs and the actions of a subsequent phase at the time of application, that's tough. It's a bit tougher because our peer reviewers need to be able to evaluate the project and the merit of the project on based of what you've provided us with. So if we don't know what's coming, it can be a little challenging. So in that sense, it makes sense more to do a staged approach of multiple applications.
Super. Another question in. Does this program fund education programs or community engagement programs?
So not in isolation. We would fund, so let's say you're doing a study on, new stormwater infrastructure in, a public space, and you want to, consult with your public, with your stakeholders, with the businesses in the area, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely, that can be a part of it. If you're looking at, a community potable water consumption reduction pilot, of course, you're going to be wanting to educate your residents and provide that sort of consultation and that support along the way. So to answer that question, yes, those aspects can be part of a project, but they can't be just that. There still needs to be the actual, physical implementation, or in the case of a feasibility study, the design element that really gets to that sort of, quantified benefit, to not overuse that term, but it still needs to have the components of kind of the things I was implying, but absolutely those parts can be intertwined within your project.
Great. I think just a couple more questions and then it seems like we have completed them all. There's one here saying, asking, are biosolids treatment projects eligible for funding?
They absolutely could be. So I mean, there's different parameters in which you would apply to for that. So if it's biosolid treatment that is, making them more available for better reuse, that's diverting from your landfill. So if you're finding an alternative to landfilling, it could fit under our waste stream category. If it's like in the example I showed, it's actually improving the effluent quality of your wastewater, then it could fit in wastewater. If you're using the biosolids for some sort of energy generation, it could possibly fit in our energy. So I think it's a good one, and it's a not a tricky one, but it's where we could fit it. But I would say yes, definitely aspects of biosolid treatment could fit into multiple streams.
That's great. I see there, Lam, you've had your question just answered. So for anybody wondering if they can get a copy of today's presentation, if you just look to the right to your little dashboard, you'll see a handouts section with a link to the Green Municipal Fund Water and Wastewater document. If you click on that, you have access to the handout. Also to note that this webinar is recorded and will be released on our FCM website over the next few weeks. So if you have any colleagues that didn't get to attend today, or if you wish to watch this again, it will be available on our website. So I think we're almost out of time, 3 minutes to go. So let's wrap up here. Patrick, thank you for your presentation today and navigating us through the Green Municipal Fund. And thank you to all the participants for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about what we can offer. And also just to reiterate what Patrick had previously said, we are here to help you within FCM in general, but myself and Patrick specifically are happy to help you with any queries that you may have along the way. And I think that's it. That's all my notes for today. So thank you again, and we will see you hopefully tomorrow at the next webinar. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.